So let's begin from page number 130. Evidence and arguments about the links between education and social mobility. So today we will study the evidence and arguments that are available about the links between education and social mobility. How education is helping in social mobility. Social mobility means moving one person from one class to another. Means from a lower class person is moving into the higher class or above. So faith schools and selection bias. Faith schools are basically religious schools, okay, and how they have selection bias. They used to select the students based on the certain conditions what are spared over there. So Shepard and Rogers in 2012 analysis, what does it say? That in the context in the UK, state furnished Christian faith schools may select pupils based on uh, parental faith. Means the Christian schools in UK does not select the students based on their intellectual ability, does not give equal opportunity to equals to every student. They select students based on the faith they believe in. If they belongs to Christianity, then only they are allowed to study in that particular school. That's why they have bias towards the faith of the person, towards the faith of the people. What does they find? Shepherd and Rogers, what does they find? These schools admit a lower proportion of working class people. Means they just select a very low proportion of the working class people that exist in their catchment area, within their catchment area. Like if the school is situated in London, so within the radius of 5 kilometers from that particular school, they are selecting the pupils within that catchment area, and in that catchment area, they are selecting very low proportion of working class people. Okay, first of all, they are biased towards Christianity. Second thing, they are selecting very low proportion of working class people. What does it quote? That England's faith state schools are on average falling to mirror their local communities by shunning the poorest pupils in that area. Means they are not representing the entire population within that particular area. They are just they have shunned, they have stopped the poor people to come to their particular schools. Okay, so only a few poor families pupils are allowed in those schools. What are the implications of it? Consumer choice on education is effectively reserved for families with the knowledge, time, and resources. So, consumer choice means if a person wants to get his child admitted to that particular faith school, Christian school, that is limited to only if the parent has knowledge, time, and resources. Resources means economic resources like money, financial resources to navigate the criteria as reserved by the faith school, typically the middle class. Okay, so typically middle class can only qualify to those particular conditions, not the lower class. Mechanism of exclusion. What are the mechanisms that are followed for exclusion of the child? So parental faith tests. So they used to test the parental faith, they used to interview the parents. So how much faith do they have within Christianity? So require members for or of or regulate attendance at the church. So they should test the attendance at the church, how far they are getting to the church. Okay, acts as a barrier to low income families who may lack such ties. Low income families, they may go more towards work so that they can sustain their families, and they have to go less to the churches. That's why their attendance at the churches is very low, and that's the reason their bards are not allowed to enter into those schools, because their faith, they are considered to have less faith apart from the other students. So geographic selection. Faith schools often locate in more affluent areas, further disadvantaging poor peoples. Faith schools are usually located in more posh areas, okay, highly influenced areas, which are having very rich people usually. Okay, so that's why their catchment area is within those nearby places. So the poor people, they cannot travel so long to get into those schools. So that's why it is acting as a barrier for the poor people. Second is cultural capital. Cultural capital, as we have already discussed, what is cultural capital? That is how much cultural facilities do they have? Okay, cultural facilities include, like, if the parents are supporting to education, parents are knowledgeable, they can motivate their child at home towards education. All these culture favors, like in some cultures there are many IAS, IPS of civil servants. In some cultures there are many businessmen. So that cultural capital is also required towards education. Middle class parents understand how to demonstrate faith commitment in applications, leveraging their social know-how. Means middle class parents know how to demonstrate their faith to the schools. Poor people does not know how to demonstrate his particular faith to the schools. Okay, they'll be confused. Like whenever they ask questions, how will you classify your faith? They will say, sir, what kind of faith? We are just working people and all like that. Okay, but the middle class people, they can manage everything because they are more knowledgeable. Okay, in the applications, leveraging the social know-how. Leveraging means they're getting benefit of social know-how. They know how things are working socially. Selective entry via interviews and tests. Selective entry means they used to select who to get entered into that particular school, and through interviews and tests. So middle class advantage in selection. Middle class used to, there are two classes usually studied here. One is lower class, one is middle class. So lower class usually does not qualify for test. Okay. So interview skills. Families with experience of formal interviews coach children on presentation manners and confidence. Those families who have know-hows of how interviews work, they used to train their children for the interviews and tests. But the lower class people does not, who are just working as laborers, they don't know how to train the people for interviews. That's why their bards does not perform well in the interviews of the schools. Entrance test preparation via tutoring and shadowing given class gives middle class candidates an edge. So, and when entrance tests are there, so the middle class people, they used to train their wards for private by the way of private tutoring for the entrance test. But a lower class person cannot tutor their ward because they have limited resources. They have resources just to eat for the next time. Results. What are results? Working class children lacking these supports are underrepresented. Underrepresented means if there are 50 lower class students who have applied and just 10 middle class students who have applied, and if 15 has to be selected, so 10 of the middle class people will be selected and 5 will be lower class students. So they are unrepresented. Otherwise, what could be the proper selection? Okay, out of 50 middle class and 50 lower class and 10 middle class, major proportion should be from the lower class. That is actual representation. The same proportion should be there, but they are underrepresented because of their inability to perform well in the interviews and tests due to lack of resources. Debate over bridge bright working class children. So there is a debate over why the working class children are bright. Critics view that IQ and ability tests reflect the cultural bias and favor those with access to enrichment activities. Objective test does not guarantee their outcomes for the working class people. So the critics view that the IQ test and the ability test just reflect the cultural bias. One student is having cultural advantage, cultural capital of private tutoring, motivational parents, facilities of internet and everything. So these are cultural advantages with the middle class children. So these tests reflect these cultural biasness. Those who have these facilities will perform well in the test. Those who don't have these facilities, they will not perform well in the test. Okay. So favor those with access to enrichment activities. So it favors only those who have access to these enrichment activities. Enrichment means enriching knowledge. These kind of activities which enrich the knowledge. Enrich knowledge means like private tutoring, interviews, interact access, supporting parents, knowledgeable parents. So these kind of things. So objective test does not guarantee. Whenever we used to take an objective test, they do not guarantee fair outcomes. It does not reflect the actual position, actual mind state of the person. Okay, so of the working class people. Sanders in 1996 defends that he argues that the middle class children genuinely outperform in objective tests because they are on average more intelligent. So Sanders defends this particular theory and presents a counter to the critics. Counter to the critics, he said that middle class children genuinely outperform. They are genuinely performing. It's not that they are getting facilities, that's why they are performing well. They genuinely outperform, and they are actually more intelligent. Therefore, lower class performance is reflection of real ability differences. So, when the lower class people are underperforming in the test, it is the reflection of their genuine ability. They are not even able. Okay, not the system unfairness. It is not the system which is unfair. It is actually their mental ability, which is not at per that mark. Okay, wider implications for social mobility. So structural versus individual explanations. So there are such structural explanations versus individual explanations. So New Right versus or Sanders focus on individual life choices and innate ability to explain mobility differences. So they used to say that it is the individual life choices. A student who is from the middle class, he chose to study more and he performed well in the examination. And a person from the lower class, he chose to be more anti-school subculture, and he chosen to be of a conflicting thought way. So that's why he does not study, and that's why he is unable to perform well in the examination. It is the innate ability of a student. Somebody is good at something, somebody is good at other thing. So it is the innate ability. A person who is performing well in the examination is the innate ability of that particular individual. Okay. Conflict perspective. Conflict perspective given by Marxists and the feminists. They say that they emphasize the structural barriers. They said there are structural barriers. The structure of the society has certain barriers, like some of the patriarchy does not allow female students to study. So there are structural barriers. Selection mechanisms. Selection mechanism which favor the middle class. Cultural capital. Cultural capital, as we have discussed a lot of times. Faith tests. This is to test people based on the faith. So structural barrier is there. That reproduce class privilege. Means which favors the class privilege. Only higher class people can succeed these structural barriers, not the lower class people. Evidence of limited working class mobility. So means they said there are limited evidence of working class mobility. Shepard and Rogers. Faith school selection pattern reduce upward mobility for poor people. They said that when faith school do not select the poor people, and based on their certificates, people used to get higher jobs and all. So that when they will not select the poor people, so they are reducing their chances of upward mobility. Okay, generalizing beyond faith schools. So there are generalizations which is beyond faith schools. Similar patterns found in grammar and private schools. So the pattern found in faith schools is reflected in grammar schools and the private schools. They also select the brilliant minds and from the affluent families, where wealth and cultural capital shape entry. Okay, it is the general pattern everywhere nowadays. Evaluating the evidence. So the empirical data, Shepard and Rogers provide quantitative evidence for working class underrepresentation. They provided the quantitative data. Quantitative means numerical data, which show that the working class people are underrepresented. They collected the data from the schools and they presented that, see, only 5% or 10% of the peoples from the entire classroom are of just lower class. Okay, that's why the schools are underrepresenting the working class. Focus on mechanism highlights how non-academic criteria, faith and interview act as gatekeepers. They highlighted how the non-academic criteria, means academic criteria is about how intellectual, how the person is performing in examination, but non-academic criteria is like financial health, financial well-being of the family, cultural capital, okay, the support of the family. These are acting out the attendance at the church. So these non-academic criteria act as gatekeepers. They keep away the lower class families from the schools. What are the limitations of the study? The scope is limited. The study limited to faith schools. The study was just limited to the faith schools. May not capture all forms of selection bias across the system. So they are saying there are various selection biases across the system, but the faith schools are just getting one criteria of faith within the consideration. So they are just studying the faith schools. Casuality means it is very casual approach of studying actually. Difficult to disentangle faith commitment from social economic status. So we cannot. There is a it is very difficult in the sense disentangle means whenever two things are tied very tightly, and it is very difficult to remove separate them apart is disentangle. Okay, so it's very difficult to disentangle faith commitment from social economic status. Faith commitment and social economic status are very tightly bounded. Okay, some working class families are also devout and apply successfully. Some working class family or lower class families are also devout. Devout means they are very good devotees. Okay, so they are very good devotees as well of the faith of the Christianity. So they also can be successfully applied into that. So this criteria of faith school is very casually provided. Okay, that is the limitation. Theoretical implications, meritocracy myth. So cases like faith school selection expose the gap between formal equality, what is the actually formal equality, and real equality of opportunity. If, what is formally equality means, and how really the faith school are exposing their particular structures. Role of cultural capital. It confirms Bourdieu's thesis that middle class dispositions confer the advantage beyond raw ability. Since Bourdieu has confirmed that there are Bourdieu's thesis. What it says that the middle class dispositions, middle class is not getting enough opportunities in the higher places. So this confirms that particular theory. Okay, so you can understand this. You can read these key terms and the thinkers also. Whatever have been came over here. So some key terms have been provided in the notes as well. The thinkers they have been given separately. Okay, additional key terms have been given. You can read them as well. Okay, there is an activity as well. Why do functionaries believe that education system must be meritocratic? Some point wise answers is there. You can refer the sample answers of these. Why meritocracy can be good for individuals and society? There are sample answers for that as well. You can refer these points to write your answers. Okay. Let us just finish up this once. Why do functionaries believe that education system must be meritocratic? Functionaries argue that modern industrial societies role allocation by ability. Okay, functionaries means who favor the meritocracy. So they say that role is allocated by ability. Okay, points, explanation, and function. You can read that. Motivation through reward. So people who are performing well are motivated through rewards. Social solidarity and value consensus. Society is social solidarity means society is maintaining the social structure through these kind of things like who is performing well, he is getting the opportunity. And value consensus means people are having consensus about this thing. He whosoever performs well, he will be given the chances. So value consensus is there. Ways meritocracy can be good for individuals and society. How meritocracy can be good for individual and society? It is good for individuals. It is good for society. Is divided into two parts. First is fairness of opportunity. Everybody individual is getting opportunity. So it is also good for society. Social mobility is available for this. If there is true meritocracy, a person can be socially uplift his current class. It is also good for society, so it becomes dynamic. Effective role allocation means it gives effective roles. Means whosoever is good at one who is good at flying plane, he will be given pilot role. One who is good at doctory, he will be given medical roles. So it is also good for society. Everybody is benefiting for that. Motivation and efforts. It motivates the people and their efforts. Self-discipline and resilience, good for society. Legitimacy of social order. So it legitimizes, legalizes the social order, whatever order is maintained in the society. So social order is required in the society as value consensus and social solidarity. So critique of each meritocratic benefit. So this is counter agreement of each meritocratic benefit. Fairness of opportunity. They are saying there are structural bias. Social mobility. They say meritocracy is a myth. Okay. Efficient roles allocation. They are saying credentialism. Okay. Everybody is not getting it. Motivation and efforts. This is stress, anxiety, and underachievement are over there. Legitimacy of social order. They are saying it's very rigid. It's not that easy. So you can read all these stuff in the notes. Okay. Tomorrow we'll begin with 4.3. It ends here 4.2. Tomorrow we'll begin with 4.3 from page number 131. Page 131.